excerpt was taken from a Full and Bloom interview with producer-engineer Beau Hill. To listen to more from our interviews with Beau, click the links in the description. How was it working with Stephen?
Well, at first, it took us a little while to kind of get in sync with each other. But what wound up happening was we kind of did Stephen's vocals a little differently. Because he had been doing these songs live for so long, he kind of got into a rhythm, and it was difficult for him to kind of break out of it. So if I came up with an idea to change the melody or something like that, I'd say, so Stephen, try something a little bit different on this word. And it was hard for him to do that on the fly. And so I started singing stuff to him over the talkback. I said, try this, go da-da-da-da-da-da, whatever. And he did it. So if I kept feeding him the melodies that I was hearing and that I wanted to at least try on the song, then I'd feed it to him and he'd do it. So pretty much that's kind of how we did Stephen. So much so that when we went to pre-production for Invasion, Stephen didn't even show up. And the guys in the band were starting to get pissed. And, why won't you show up? And he said, well, Beau's going to change everything anyway when we get in the studio, so why do I need to waste my time coming to rehearsal? So we basically worked on these songs, and nobody was really sure exactly how the melodies were going to go 100%. I mean, we had ideas, but it wasn't finalized until Stephen and I went through our process line by line in the studio, which made everybody a little nuts, which I can understand because nobody really knew what it was going to sound like when we were done. But anyway, it was just a way of communication that Stephen and I kind of developed, and I'm sure he was probably quite frustrated with me, changing stuff on him all the time. But at the end of the day, the results were pretty good.
Were you doubling his vocals most of the time?
Yes.
I'm assuming. Oh, go ahead.
So what I did with Stephen, and I actually kind of continued to do this throughout my career, we would do 3 takes of the song. And depending on how his voice was, what we would do a lot of times, on a lot of those songs back in those days, the chorus repeats at the end over and over and over ad nauseum. So I would have Stephen start on the choruses at the out just to get his voice warmed up and get it where it's really sounding very Stephen-y. And then we'd go back and start recording the front of the song. And so we'd keep working until I got 3 complete takes. Then I'd call the session, and that was it. So early the next morning, I would always show up for work around 8 o'clock or so because the guys in the band didn't like working that early. Actually, they didn't like working at 10 o'clock, which is when I had band call. But I would go in and I would do a vocal comp because I was fresh and well rested, and I could be more objective about did we catch a fish or did we not. And then I put together the very best of the 3 takes, and I'd play that back to Stephen when he came into work the next day. And if, we'd listen to it and he'd say, yeah, first verse is okay, but I think I got a better second verse in me. Okay, great. Or I would say, look, the choruses are okay, but the verses suck, so let's give it another go. So we did the same procedure, and I would keep the best stuff on its own private track, and then we'd go do 3 more. And then I'd do the whole process again and see if I actually had anything on day 2 that would rival what I thought was good on day 1. If you kind of understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so that was really just our little process of how we did it. And then once we got to the point where he was singing, but we weren't beating the master comp, then we're done. That was it.
How was Bobby in the studio? I'm sure he was well prepared, but how was he to work with?
Very difficult, very difficult. He was out of everybody. He was the one that was always the hardest to please. Something was not right with just about everything. And he was my least favorite guy to spend any time with. He was, at least in my estimation, he was kind of generally I don't know how I could put this, generally just disagreeable. Let me put it that way.
Bobby didn't write at all, right?
Well, there again was another very sensitive point, was when the guys in the band that wrote the material that were hits started getting these fat publishing checks that Bobby wasn't getting, that really created some problems. And so we tried indirectly give Bobby a couple of half credits or something like that on the record, just to keep peace in the family.
But he didn't necessarily write anything, even coming up with kind of drum ideas?
We differentiated, he's being paid as the drummer, and the drummer is supposed to come up with drum ideas, and that's not writing. We distinguish writing as melody and lyrics.
Okay.
So, we didn't give Warren a writing credit for coming up with a solo. If he came up with
of course,
a verse and a chorus idea, here's the chords, blah, 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 then he got in on the writing. And of course, at the end of the record, when it came time for everybody to determine and put on paper, who did what to who and who wrote what and blah, 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 blah. I mean, those were always incredibly tense discussions, because it was like, oh man, he didn't say that. Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, I mean, it was just, it got like eighth graders at recess, and especially egregious, once these guys started figuring out how much money potentially was at play, everybody would lobby like crazy for their position. I mean, nobody was going to give up without a fight. And so it was a fight every time.
Yeah, well, at least they wwere conscious of it. A lot of guys I've interviewed, they weren't even thinking about it. I kind of felt bad for Bobby later, even though, he took, even going out on Ratt on his own and stuff like that. I was like, I kind of understood, because I'm like, that guy didn't get any of that money. He doesn't have anything that kind of keeps coming in.
Well, he has his Ratt royalties.
Of course, but the publishing is where kind of in the later years is what keeps paying the bills, right?
It's the gift that keeps on giving.